Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're diving into something really profoundly transformative. If you've ever felt this disconnect between your spiritual goals and your day-to-day reality, or maybe you found your dedication slipping when life gets stressful, well, you're definitely not alone. Today's explainer is a highly informative deep dive into a really vital principle, the idea that cultivating the Dao absolutely requires us to eliminate doubt to engender true unwavering faith. We're going to map out exactly how to build this unbreakable foundation for spiritual success, basically turning ancient wisdom into practical steps for your life right now. So what you're looking at here is the title page of the profound source text we'll be decoding today. And look, this isn't just, abstract philosophical musing. It's a literal structured blueprint for personal transformation. The text makes it incredibly clear that doubt is the #1 roadblock to enlightenment. It stops our progress, it weakens our resolve, and it literally keeps us trapped in this endless cycle of hesitation. But the beautiful thing about this text, it doesn't just point out the problem. It actually gives us the exact cure. Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to use a really clear diagnosis, symptoms, and cures structure today. So we'll look at the roots of doubt, what happens when we stagnate, the cure itself, which is the 5 true faiths, and finally, how to actually build that spiritual foundation. All right, let's start with the diagnosis. Why do we struggle with doubt in the first place? You see, before we can build an unbreakable foundation of faith, we really need to validate and understand why we stumble. The source material is super clear here. Having doubts, even after receiving the Tao, is a totally common human experience, but it's one we have to actively dismantle. The text rapidly diagnoses 5 distinct karmic and worldly reasons for this. First up is our own spiritual blindness. Just kind of blindly following the crowd instead of seeking inner truth. Second, distracting environments. Let's face it, our modern world is so loud and it's constantly pulling our focus toward material things and away from spiritual clarity. Third, we've got heavy karmic bonds that weigh us down, making the path feel, unusually difficult. Fourth is our own intellect, and fifth is just a simple lack of deep understanding regarding spiritual truths. I actually really want to focus on that fourth point for a second because it is just so relevant today. Take a look at this comparison. On one side, we have our modern intellectual barriers. We live in an era that completely demands visible, physical, scientifically measurable proof for literally everything. But then, on the other side, is spiritual truth. The source text explicitly states that relying solely on our physical eyes acts as a massive barrier. True spiritual realities operate invisibly, totally beyond ordinary human perception. When we demand worldly proof for heavenly concepts, doubt is pretty much the only possible result.
And that leads us perfectly into the cost of stagnation. What are the actual symptoms of this doubt?
So what actually happens when we let these roots of doubt just grow unchecked? The text uses some brilliant, vivid idioms to describe real-world spiritual stagnation. And this one beautifully illustrates our first symptom. The text warns against becoming a frog in a well. Imagine a frog just sitting at the bottom of a deep well, looking up. It sees this tiny little circle of blue and truly believes that that tiny circle is the entire sky. In spiritual terms, this is a dangerously narrow perspective. It represents a practitioner who thinks their minimal effort, their tiny bit of understanding, is completely sufficient. They're entirely blind to the vast, necessary work of cultivation, simply because their doubt has confined their worldview. Now, the second symptom is captured in this idiom, waiting for a rabbit. This perfectly describes the trap of passive cultivation. It comes from a story about a farmer who saw a rabbit run into a stump and die, and then he just spent the rest of his life waiting by that stump for it to happen again, completely neglecting his actual farming. Spiritually, this means lacking personal initiative. It's when you rely entirely on others to call you, to remind you, or to push you to cultivate, instead of actively driving your own spiritual growth. It's a huge symptom of weak faith. And here's the thing. If we stay in that well, or if we just sit around waiting for the rabbit, it inevitably leads to this, giving up halfway. This is the ultimate tragedy outlined in the text. When a foundation of belief is too shallow, the very first sign of a difficult test, maybe a complex human relationship issue or a stressful worldly environment, is going to sway us completely off course. Because the faith wasn't structurally sound to begin with, the true essence of the Tao remains hidden from us, and we end up abandoning the path entirely. So here is the absolutely vital question for all of us right now. How do we actually break free from these karmic chains? How do we stop being that frog in the well? And how do we find the definitive cure to eliminate doubt entirely so we don't end up giving up halfway? Well, the answer is right here. Let's get into the targeted antidote, the 5 true faiths. The ancient wisdom doesn't just tell us to believe more. It actually provides 5 distinct structural pillars of faith that serve as the exact, targeted antidote to the doubts we were just talking about. Think of this as your sequential roadmap out of doubt. These 5 true faiths are faith in Buddhas and deities, faith in the Dao and Dharma, faith in vows, faith in calamities, and finally, faith in the heavenly decree. Let's break down exactly why each of these is a mandatory building block for your foundation.
First up is faith in Buddhas, and the text presents a pretty stark reality check here. On our own, our human capability is incredibly limited. The source material notes that we are carrying around roughly 60,000 years of accumulated karma. I mean, just try clearing that with your daily willpower. It's literally impossible. We have to have absolute faith in divine support, the invisible protection, the merciful guidance, and the energetic backing of the Buddhas and deities. Without trusting in their unseen help, the sheer weight of our karma will inevitably cause that doubt to creep right back in.
Moving on, the second and third faiths really go hand in hand, faith in the Dao and faith in vows. Having faith in the Dao means recognizing that this truth is the ultimate vehicle to break that agonizing cycle of life and death. But just understanding that truth isn't enough on its own, right? You need a direction, and that is exactly where faith in vows comes in. Taking sincere vows isn't about restriction, it's about navigation. Your vows provide the precise compass you need to guide you out of aimless karmic wandering and to keep you laser-focused whenever distractions hit.
Now, the fourth pillar is perhaps the most sobering, faith in calamities. The text states incredibly clearly that we are living in the final era, an atmosphere that unfortunately brings disasters and calamities. Now, this isn't meant to cause panic, not at all. From a highly informative perspective, it's really designed to instill a crucial sense of urgency. Acknowledging the precarious state of the world strips away our complacency. It forces us to stop waiting for the rabbit and start actively, urgently cultivating truth today.
And that brings us to the fifth and final pillar, faith in the heavenly decree. In a world full of noise, so many varying spiritual paths, and frankly, a lot of false teachings out there, how do you know you're actually on the right track? Well, by trusting the authentic, true mandate of heaven. This faith is the capstone of the whole thing. It ensures you stay rooted, protected from spiritual misguidance, and confidently walking the true path back to your spiritual origins without constantly second-guessing your every step.
So with those pillars firmly established, let's move into our final segment, actually applying this cure and building your spiritual foundation.
We've diagnosed the problem, we've looked at the symptoms, and we've decoded the cure. Now it is all about application. So, the really crucial point here is redefining what faith actually is. According to our source text, true faith is absolutely not some blind, passive belief. It's described as a fundamental stepping stone. It is an active, structural bedrock. You wouldn't try to build a towering skyscraper on a swamp of doubt, right? You need a solid foundation. Eliminating doubt and installing these 5 true faiths is the mandatory engineering required for any real spiritual achievement.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with this to ponder. Look, we all have moments of doubt. It's completely human, but the blueprint is now right in your hands. So, will you let the dangerously narrow view of the frog in the well dictate your reality? Will you just passively wait for enlightenment to tap you on the shoulder? Or are you going to actively begin to build your unbreakable foundation using the 5 true faiths today? The choice, and the spiritual success that follows, is entirely yours to cultivate. Keep learning, keep building, and I will see you in the next explainer.